Hey, it's time for TV Skywriter.
Good afternoon, all, and welcome to TV Skywriter. I'm Pat Murray, your host. I do the Durham Skywriter, that's Durham, North Carolina's online community paper, but today I'm doing TV Skywriter, and I have the pleasure of having a very special guest, artist Eric McRay. Welcome to the show, Mr. McRay.
Thank you very much, Pat. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Now, we're in your studio. Now, this is a real treat. Because judging by your website, people just can't drop by and just waltz in and look around. So
well, they can, but I can't promise you I'll be here. I have a pretty busy and active schedule, so I could be off teaching or doing workshops or preparing for an exhibition. So my schedule's pretty varied. Sometimes I'll meet with clients and collectors. So it's ideal if someone contacts me and schedule an appointment, then we can meet, and I'll be glad to show them around.
Awesome. Now, this is a gigantic treat, like I said. Now, a lot of us grow up drawing and painting and calling ourselves artists.
Right.
But you, sir, are indeed an artist. This is what you do.
Yes, it is.
It sounds like a dream come true. So how did that happen to you? Obviously, it didn't happen by accident. And I would just like to know.
No, far from accident.
Yeah, I'd like to know, how did you go beyond what the rest of us do, which is just draw for pleasure, and how did you go way beyond that as you have?
Well, my mother said I started drawing at 2, and like most children, I created, and I was in front of television, sketching things I saw on television, and putting all my kind of little imaginations on paper. The thing is that I had a very supportive family and encouraged that kind of creativity. And I came from a family of very hands-on creative folks who were carpenters and plumbers and contractors and entrepreneurs that work with their hands. And thus my family encouraged it and never discouraged me from my expression. And I had the good fortune to grow up in Washington, D.C., and had some really good art teachers who were very supportive when I was in public school and nurtured that gift. And I believe I had a genuine gift, but I think a lot had to do with environment and support of loved ones.
I need for you to elaborate just a bit, because that's another thing that I want to touch on. I've heard about this. I've met people who had talent, but their family. Now, I know you're younger than I am, but I'm just saying.
I can't promise you that.
But here's the thing. A lot of people have told me that they wanted to go into the arts, but their parents did not encourage it, not because they were mean, but because they were worried.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it is a misrepresentation, a misunderstanding what careers in the arts are. So often people see these paintings, well, not paintings, but movies and films where there's this artist starving, or they hear about the overly romanticized life of Vincent van Gogh. Well, Vincent van Gogh had some issues that prevented him from being successful in his lifetime, but he was an extremely talented man, and he had a really bad art dealer that was his brother. And so things never really panned out for him, but the stories of the really successful artists aren't necessarily told in the same fashion. It's not as romantic to hear about somebody dying a billionaire or dying a multimillionaire. Those were the success stories. Like Picasso died a billionaire. So
wow.
And Vincent van and Claude Monet was an extremely wealthy man in his lifetime. A lot of artists that that have longevity and a consistency and a professionalism arts in the long run. Many of them built very lucrative and successful careers that you just don't hear about. If they don't destroy themselves with reckless living or some kind of behavior issue, they tend to do extremely well. It's just a matter of making that commitment. Now, concerning your average young person who wants to start a career in the arts, we live in a very visual age. I mean, look at the idea that we're communicating through the internet as we speak, and the graphics, the visuals, everything that's involved in that process. Some creative soul who understands programming put that together, from your T-shirts to the chair you're sitting on to the brochures you pick up in advertisements on television, internet, so forth. There's somebody who has a background in graphic design, illustration, some sort of industrial design, that's taken that and made a commercial application of it. So I think often people are naive about the application and the usage of someone's talents. It's just a miseducation about the arts.
Mhm. So, should it be in school or in the general media where we should learn about the various types of art?
Oh yeah, most definitely, most definitely. Excuse me, my when I was in school, I studied commercial art and graphic design. So by the time I was 16, I was working at the YWCA doing art instruction, and also worked for a design agency called Just Your Type. And I was doing paste up and graphic design when I was 16, 17, 18 years old. So by the time I started college, which I had a scholarship for, and helped me out, I was already actively working as an artist by the time I was college age. And that all makes a difference. So when I left college, I worked for a sign company doing graphics. And I mean, everything from your menu boards to your brochures, there's somebody who has understanding of graphics and visuals creating those things.
That's awesome. Now, is that what I wanted you to define commercial art? Does that mean everything like clothing, to mailboxes, and what you just described, menus? Yep. Is that what commercial art is?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, commercial art falls in the category of, let's say someone's illustrating a comic book or designing a cartoon or doing a cartoon on television, designing a logo. Just this is an assigned type of work that has a practical commercial application. Fine art tends to be more art for art's sake. Someone comes with some kind of idea of burst of creativity, and they create something, and then they look for if the person chooses, they look for a market for that particular type of work, because for original art is still there, and people want it, and they want something real, and it has some deep intrinsic aesthetic value.
Now, this is really interesting. Now, in the world of writing, very often, for example, journalists and public relations folks go at each other's throats sometimes, because very often journalists think of public relations folks as, I don't believe this. I mean, other journalists, not me. But I think sometimes they feel because public affairs folks are or public relations folks rather, are writing to promote something, that is the opposite of what they're doing, which I don't think so. So very often they look down on each other, and they're at each other's throats, the two industries. It sounds like that's not how it is in the art world. The commercial artist.
Very similar. It's very similar in the sense that the criticism or the lack of respect, it goes both ways. You can have someone who's very much commercially driven, who may, for example, design websites, or they do logos. They may have admiration for fine artists, but then at the same time they're thinking, well, they're not a fine artist. They're going to just make product and provide a service and get paid and compensated for their time and effort.
They probably call them sellouts, right?
Huh?
They probably call them sellouts, I guess, which I don't. I actually think that we should actually realize that both are true artists, because I can just, in fact, somebody posted some electronic device on Facebook about an hour ago, and I said, I don't know what this device is, but it looks great. The design was sweet. It was sleek, had nice buttons. I mean, I admire that, but then you can turn around and admire something by Picasso or Eric McRay as art.
Yeah, and I've seen things in all different kinds of realms of creativity that are really exquisite. And it's just the understanding with the source. I mean, if you think about it, the Sistine Chapel was not just created because one day Michelangelo woke up and said, I want to paint on the top of this chapel. The Pope commissioned him and hired him to do that. So as a commercial art, as a fine art. But the idea of what art is very, very much according to history and the time period you're in, and how art is applied to the overall society. I mean, with the advent of photography, fine art became more relevant because before photography and film, who were your journalists? Who were your visual journalists? Who were the people who documented religion and family and faith and societal events? It was painters and it was sculptors who would do sculptures of Jesus or of Jupiter, paintings of the Last Supper, or paintings of some pope or some lord or some baron of some sort. So these people had a purpose in society. So when photography came about, all of a sudden, no longer were you obligated to have to paint that battle scene during the Civil War. There was somebody with a camera photographing the carnage.
Right.
So now art became more free for personal expression.
I like that.
So now we live in a period now where it's kind of even more so going back to greater application of talents to integrate visuals into the society. I mean, someone picks up their iPhone or their Android and start, moving along that toggling across the screen. There's images that constantly responding to emojicons. Somebody created that. So they just didn't grow up out of the internet.
Right.
Somebody took time to design it, program it, and put it on the web.
Wow. I want to get back to your career. Now, you got a 4-year scholarship.
Yes, ma'am.
I find that astonishingly awesome. And I'm wondering, at what age did you get, how can I put this? At what age did you realize that you could do something with your art and really took it seriously? Because I'm guessing as a child you were having fun, right?
Still having a lot of fun.
Oh, that's great.
Still having a whole lot of fun. I feel guilty sometimes. I have so much fun.
Oh, wow.
But
at what age still did you start pursuing this as your life's work?
And when I was in the first grade.
Whoa.
I was in the first grade.
You saw yourself as an artist at age 6?
Yes. What happened was I was in the first grade. I've told the story so many times, and I wish I could remember I had a picture of the actual image. But when I was in first, second grade, it was around that period, the teacher asked who would want to help with the bulletin board. And I said, I raised my hand. No one else showed interest. And thus I went to use this construction paper and other materials to create this image of Rumpelstiltskin on a bulletin board. And what happened, the teacher was just so amazed by my talents and what I created. She rushed off to another classroom, bring these other teachers in, and then oohing and on. Well, when you're that young, you're just amazed that somebody in this position and this authority is so impressed with your talents. This, like Sir Isaac Newton's apple, hit me in the head that made me realize that in the midst of my joy and my fulfillment, that I was enriching the lives of others, and as well bringing something of quality and value to the world. And then that's when my journey really took off, because then I had this external validation. And even though when I had a lot of criticism, tremendous amount of criticism over the years, I always knew that what I had was a God-given talent, and also as well as a lot of dedication and determination to be very successful at this.
You said the word criticism, and I always wondered, how does one, when I read music critiques or art critiques, how do you critique art? I mean, let me ask this, because I only took art class as a, casual, in school. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you critique art, are you trying to put the artist in some kind of historical perspective and comparing them to the artists of the ages? Or are they simply saying, I don't really like this because I think his lines are squiggly? I mean, what goes into art criticism?
That's as broad as asking. Art fundamentally is based off of philosophy. Every type of art is based from philosophy. How do you perceive the world then determines how you depict the world. And what your belief system is going to depict how you create images. Thus, when someone who is an art critic is the same way if you said, Rabbi, I want you to review this sermon by this Baptist preacher. Well, he's approaching it from his worldview. So he may agree with some things and disagree with others, but basically it's from his worldview. So the art critic can be as varied from the disgruntled artist who can write fairly well to somebody who really understands art and may be trying to figure out the historic significance of the person's work. Or it could be the technician who just says, well, that person isn't a very good draftsman. They can't draw well, or they can't paint well, or what's their skill set. So it's so varied. And I found the most successful way to deal with art critics is to continue making art. And while they look and they critique and they have opinions, I keep making art. And whether they like it or dislike it, I keep making art. And if they buy it, sell it, dislike it, criticize it, I keep making art. And then ultimately, the free market and history will determine the greatness of what I do and my significance as an artist.
That makes absolute perfect sense. In other words, if there's somebody out there buying it and liking it, it must have some kind of value and relevance to somebody.
Yes.
And if somebody doesn't like it, well, maybe it's not for them.
Exactly. And I paint in so many different styles and fashions. If you look behind me there, you'll see some of my heart paintings. And I probably painted close to 300 of those paintings. If you look over this way, you'll see my jazz painting.
Wait. Tell us about the hearts. Is that is it a project to see how many different types of hearts you can make?
Well, what happened, I had an experience when I left art school. And I met a gentleman whose his name was Mr. I think it was Tibbs, and he had the Tibbs collection in Washington, D.C. And I met him, and I just left art school, and I showed him my work, and he said, this is pretty good. And this man had Romeo Barretons and Jacob Lawrence and Science of Art History Personal Museum. Meeting him, and he showed me my work. I showed him my work, and he said, well, how many do you have, young man? And I said, 30. At least 50 for somebody to take you seriously. Oh. So then all of a sudden I realized that part of my achievement was setting very finite goals, driven by emotion or external influence. Oh, it's rainy today, thus I can't produce. Or it's too hot and I can't produce. But the thing is that when you have finite goals, 50 is 50, 100 is 100, 99 is not 100. 37 is not 100. 37 is not 50. So when you set a finite goal, that forces you once again to produce. I must achieve this goal. I must work consistently. And that's where discipline comes into. It's not based off the muse or purely inspiration. I've never met an athlete or a soldier who had the attitude of like, I'm waiting for the muse.
Oh, wow.
They had to get the goal done, had to achieve the task. So with me, I set very finite goals. So that way, in the process, is forcing me to work through ideas, to resolve concepts. So with me, I years ago painted these large-scale heart paintings, and they gradually became smaller and smaller. Now you look at these here, they're like 6 by 6 inches. And I found that size worked really well for me, the little canvases, mixed media canvases. So I set the first initial goal to do 100 of them. Nice. So over a period of time, I produced more and more and more. So probably over the last 5 years, I've painted probably around about 300 plus of these paintings.
I like those a lot.
Thank you. They're pretty popular. Go to my website, ericmcray.com. I have a shopping cart on my website. You can purchase these directly from my website.
Entrepreneur. Yes, sir. Love it.
Well, every great artist from Greco-Roman society to now was entrepreneurial. Because the last time I checked in, I'd hiring famous artists any place and offer them a dental plan. So you better get out there and make it happen and get some things going for yourself.
I thought back in the olden days, artists were like musicians where they worked at the pleasure of the court or the king or whatever, and they paint their portraits and stuff, right? Yeah. But yet still those people were individuals who were in an age where you were a trained craftsman or no different than, say, the person that made horseshoes for the horses, or artists weren't on the same kind of rock star status like they have nowadays in some ways. It was much more a practical skill set. And yes, you could be there working for some king or the Pope or whoever, but bottom line, you had to have an entrepreneurial understanding of how to build and maintain a career. Okay. Now, I love jazz, and I see a trumpet behind you. What's that piece?
Yeah. This piece is called Big Blue Yonder. It's a, let's see here. You can see a little bit better. It's
Yeah.
48 by 60 inch acrylic painting on canvas. Let me see. I'm trying to moving his phone around a little bit. There we go. And you'll see some other jazz pieces here. And I'm well known for my jazz works. And this is probably the most recent jazz painting I created.
Sweet.
And it just kind of happens. Expressionism is a big part of what I do as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
I use color and expressionistic brushstroke to communicate emotion and the spirituality of different subjects.
So this is going to be a strange question. Well, maybe not so strange.
I've been asked some strange questions. I doubt if you can. I think you'll be okay.
Okay. Do you have to be what some people call educated to be a successful artist? I mean, you hear about the prodigies in art and music who with no training went over the world and make millions or whatever. But generally speaking, if you're going to be a working artist, an entrepreneur, a person whose livelihood is in your own hands, is it your responsibility to know who the artists were? And of course, so far it's usually the European and Western world type artists that we learn about in school, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I don't mean unfortunately. I mean,
Well,
I'd like to learn about more. Not that I mind learning about the Europeans, but do you have to know about them, and do you have to be trained and know the difference between impressionist and
Cubism
abstract and all that? Do you have to know that to be successful?
Well, I mean, no, you don't. No, I have a degree in art, and I've been avid study of art history and understanding my place in that timeline. And that's been very important to me, understanding what to do next and understanding what has worked previously and how I can best manage my career where I can smell my roses while I'm still alive. I'm not waiting to be famous after I'm dead, rich when I'm dead, or successful when I'm dead, because I won't. My children will, but I firmly believe that I can have it now, and many have had tremendous success in their lifetime. So I think that understanding gives you a real world perspective of what's going on around you. I've seen artists who are more talented than me, not as successful as I am, and I've seen artists less talented than I am, more successful. So it's sometimes understanding business, sometimes getting a lucky break. Sometimes artists, regardless of their talents, don't have the skill sets or the emotional stability, so to speak, to be able to maintain success. Like as famous as Jackson Pollock was, and everybody knows him for his drip pour splashy paintings.
Sure.
When he really achieved a certain amount of success, he cracked and went back to the bottle and drank himself to death.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, so he was on the top of the world. He just couldn't handle the pressure, which obviously you see with musicians all the time.
Sure. And I heard that Van Gogh only sold one painting in his whole lifetime.
I don't know if that's true or not, but he just wasn't very successful, and he had some emotional issues. But see, those are the stories we hear so much about. But there's a lot of artists that are tremendously successful that it's just not the topic of discussion as much. So, of course, then you have a generation of people like, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to die broke and hungry and begging and whatnot. I mean, that's.
Let me ask you this. I really want your opinion of this because you're such a really excellent artist.
Thank you.
Now I'm from Chicago. We might have gone to two different types of schools. I don't know, but when we studied art, for the most part, we studied the European masters, and it seemed weird to me because in college I studied art, but it was African art, and it seems so weird that when we learn about the Western guys, it seems that they celebrate the like you were talking about, the idiosyncrasies, the people who suffered and went through so much turmoil and craziness in their lives. But then when you study African art, you study not the singular artist, but this is the Kikuyu art. This is how they do sculpture. I kind of prefer that in a way, but then I don't know how you can be a renowned artist if you're an African artist and people only know the style of art and not who's behind it. But what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I've studied African art and non-European art, non-Western art, Eastern art, and the difference is a cultural difference, because a lot of art created in Africa, traditional African art that we know and see, had utilitarian purpose. The masks, the statues, bowls, whatever. They were supposed to be used for ceremonial purpose. Same what you see in Jewish culture. They have these really ornamented things that have to skirt a line of being sacred and have practical application and not be graven images in Jewish culture, where in African culture they can be graven images that represent certain spirits or certain entities. But the bottom line is they have a purpose specifically toward a lot of their life.
Okay.
And so the idea of art being created and just strictly hung on a wall to be glanced at and looked at is more of a Western concept. I mean, you see some in Asia, but mainly a lot of art has societal application. It has a real world, everyday application beyond isn't that pretty? And also the idea of the artist as an individual isn't stressed as much. That's very much a Western kind of concept of the celebrity artist, the famous artist, the rock star, the prodigy. That's a very Western kind of concept. I mean, same with singing. There's somebody who Prince passes away and people are grieving and is buying all this product and stuff around his entity and his personality because he had a brand. And so he was obviously very much a commercial entity that had built wealth and fame. And that happens with artists as well.
Yeah, I had to get your opinion of that because I felt that was, to me, that it was like battling concepts.
Well, I mean, in African culture, and I see this in European culture and American culture, Western society, is that the artist there was the shaman, the witch doctor, the spiritual leader in the community, but yet at the same time he was still an artist. So that same person who is creating these vessels and objects was also the spiritual leader. And I find a lot of times with us in this society, I have people look at me very much as a spiritual entity, a very insightful person, a seer.
It's almost like there's a sense of responsibility that maybe some artists wouldn't want to have put on them. Right?
Well, some artists make their art very much with objective to address politics or race or gender or gender issues. I mean, just across the board, how we have different aspects of society that people have grievances about or want to celebrate. So art can be used as a political tool, good and bad.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of great art. A lot of art was really propaganda.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you see the art of the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany or art created during the Jim Crow era. A lot of derogatory imagery.
Right.
But
and I've seen the elevation of the worker.
Right. So aspect of social realism. But then you see the contemporary artists may be addressing who's in the White House or what's going on about certain entity rights. So like for example, during the Harlem Renaissance, you don't see many African American artists who were abstract painters or landscape painters, because the political push was that all artists of color were supposed to be talking about African American culture and pushing back against all the negative stereotypes that had existed in America. So those
What
artists
was,
will
what was that
almost
word they used? Negritude, I believe they called it back then.
I mean,
Kind
all these
yeah.
things that are out there that were just crushing, on African American culture and Black society, that now these artists felt obligated to show the contrast.
Right, right.
So they would start painting these almost Norman Rockwell idyllic images of Black society, but non-objective abstraction or landscapes didn't push that political agenda.
Right.
And still today, you have a lot of Black artists who are pressured to paint that kind of subject matter.
Of course, now you can, right? Now you can do pretty much what you want.
I paint whatever I want, but I do encounter those who want me to paint specific things to push a particular political agenda. I like being a free man, so I make my own choices.
There you go. And speaking of being a free man, can you show us some more of your art and talk about it a little bit?
Let's see how we can. Let me pivot around a little bit. Can you see this table here? See it right here?
Yes.
There's some abstract pieces I'm currently finishing up. If you turn this way, is a large abstract painting here.
Ooh, I like that.
Golgotha. Yeah, that came up pretty well. Thank you. Then let's see.
Okay, let me ask you about abstract art. How do you know when you get it right, and how do you know when you're done?
When am I getting it right? Over my shoulder, you'll see two abstract collage paintings. And there you'll see one of my large-scale collage paintings over my shoulder. That's called Buddy's Pride and Joy. And then over here is one of my large landscapes. But
beautiful.
How do you get it? You know it's right?
Yeah.
Oh boy. That's a combination of philosophy and then also understanding the aesthetics of painting. When is the paint quality right? Is the composition strong? How did I use the color? Is the color applied well? It's no different than cooking. You look at it and say, gee, those eggs look burnt. Should I serve those burnt eggs? So you look at the painting, you're like, that's not very good. That's not working very well. How has this been presented? So it's the same kind of things you hone your eye to see in other fashions, but in painting you're able to look at it and then conclude, is this working? Now also the thing is philosophy. It's like, is this in line with the ideas I had when I started this journey? On this particular piece, I'm looking to create a particular type of work. Does that fall in line with what I'm striving for? Now if you look at the art of, say, somebody like, most people know who Rembrandt is. Sure. Or Van Gogh, Monet. All those artists, Picasso, they all painted differently. They all had different philosophy what painting is. So if you're trying to make your painting like Rembrandt, and it comes out looking like Charles Schultz and it looks like Charlie Brown. Right. Charles Schultz, good Charles Schultz and good Charlie Brown, but Charlie Brown's not Claude Monet's Water Lilies. So that's where you kind of realize, okay, I think I missed the mark.
But maybe you can repurpose it, and
Most definitely. That's how I make a lot of good collages, out of repurposed art. That didn't necessarily work how I planned, but let me cut it up and reconstruct it into something great.
That's what Oscar Michaud used to do. He was the early African American, I think one of the first Black movie directors. That's what he used to do.
Oh, really?
He would take old footage and put it into new films.
Oh.
Part of it was a money-saving tactic, but he used to just make collages in a way.
And I love the creative process. The creative process with an individual who with talent and open mind can just do all kinds of magic and break out of the box and sometimes come with new discoveries. And you making a reference to this artist is a good example of understanding history. And understanding, well, how about if I try this and try that, because this person previously did this and that. Steve Jobs did the same thing in technology. A lot of what he did with Apple was not anything that no one had ever done before. He just made a better mousetrap.
Exactly.
Because he understood certain technologies. There were tablets before.
And he was taken to court for it.
Well, I mean, in a sense, that some things are just patented to
Yeah.
society. Like IBM already had a tablet. It just wasn't everybody could own one. Steve Jobs came along. How can I make it where it fits into the overall society?
Right.
Consumer friendly.
Let me
So,
ask you about. Let me
yes.
ask you about. Okay, so do you think that most of the artists that we learn about in school, the European masters, are they, in addition to them having the personalities that made them, I guess, stand out? Do you think that
Mm-hmm.
they were also famous because they were the first to do that particular style? Like, was Picasso really the first to do cubist art? And
Well,
they,
it was he and George Brock. Artist named George Brock. You don't hear about him as much, but
no, not at
he was
all.
Picasso's creative partner. George Brock really made more of the breakthroughs than Picasso. How to take it and expand upon it and really make it great.
So Picasso had a better eye, I guess.
Much better. Yeah, he was a prodigy.
Okay. Now you call
You know,
in your website. You say that you have a Picasso-esque spirit. I don't know what that is,
yeah.
and I said I've got to have you explain what that is.
Well, Picasso believed there was no single correct pictorial solution, meaning that if I was to draw a portrait of you, this picture over my shoulder with the brown and the orange stripe, and I said, that's a portrait of you. That could be legitimately a portrait of you.
Okay.
Now I could do a portrait of you that looks exactly like you, like a photograph. That would legitimately be you. If I drew you as a cartoon or a caricature, that would be you. The key point is, does it capture the essence or the spirit of who you are? So there's no single correct pictorial solution. Doesn't mean that I have to draw it where it looks like a photograph I just snapped, and that's the only way I can depict you. I have the liberty in this postmodernist society to create you as broadly and as uniquely as I would choose to, using my artistic abilities. So Picasso had no single style. He was constantly evolving, constantly experimenting and learning. So in his greatness, he never stopped having that childlike openness to learning. And that's how I am. I'm always experimenting, trying new things, opening doors, using new materials, and finding how to be a better artist.
And I think also probably having financial success allowed him to remain free to do what he wanted to. I'm just guessing.
Yeah. Yeah. I had someone very critical of me one time about commercial success. And I said, commercial success is not so I can buy a fancy car. It's just so I can afford to have more time to make more art.
Exactly. Exactly.
If I have to go punch somebody's clock at 9 a.m. and give them 40 plus hours a week, when am I going to make art?
Exactly. Now, somebody was criticizing a particular jazz artist, and I said, you really, calling him sell out and whatnot, because he was selling out of records, he was popular. And I was saying, when you really think about it, all of the jazz artists that we've heard of are commercial successes, because how would we know about them to buy their records if they weren't commercially successful?
Right, right. That's the only reason we're having discussions about particular artists is because they're successful. The one that weren't successful, we're not discussing.
Exactly. Exactly.
About them, not saying they weren't talented. Question is, did they ever reach out beyond themselves and impact the greater society? So that's a big part of it. I think the idea of when somebody says somebody sold out, what usually happens is the person is doing what they always love, and they do it so well that other people come along and say, wow, Pat, you're doing such a great job. We want you to do this, and we offer you more, more, and more. Well, did Pat sell out, or did Pat just really achieve her goals and really become accomplished in her skills, and other people acknowledge how brilliant you are?
That's almost controversial what you just said.
I'm sure it's controversial to somebody because many people are easily offended.
I like that a lot because it makes me think. It really makes me think, because I was going to ask you this question. It's along the same line. Suppose you happen to make a painting, like, okay, the painting over your right shoulder.
I guess that's my right shoulder, or this one.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So either shoulder. But
I'm looking at myself in reverse. Okay.
But suppose somebody says, oh my God, that's the best thing I've ever seen. Now, suppose you only had one of those. Somebody buys it, or maybe when you have your open, what do you call it in Raleigh? You have
First
First
Friday,
Friday? Yeah.
every month here at Art Space, we have a First Friday gallery walk from 6 to 10 p.m.
Okay. So suppose that one painting, every time you have, your open house, that everybody gathers in front of that one painting, but you feel you've done it, you're done with it.
Right.
Does part of becoming a commercial success, or is it selling out? If you decide after selling that one of a kind art, you're saying, boy, this sure caused a sensation. Even though I'm not feeling it, I'm going to paint a bunch more of those. Now, is that art or is that
If I
commercialism?
Well, I mean, you can have mixed views about that. Many artists will ask you, will have different opinions about that. For me, I'm have the attitude that if I strictly painted what was really successful for me in the past, you wouldn't see all this work in this room
Hmm.
and the variety of works I do,
Okay.
because I have things that were really more successful, and I say, well, I'm tired of doing that. I'm gonna move on, and I'll see my income drop.
Hmm. Okay.
Now, that's not pleasant,
Hmm.
but it's the reality that I can only do so much of a particular type of work. And after a while, I'm kind of moved on. I may come back to it when I'm feeling it, but it's not purely commercially driven. So I do allow myself that freedom to make my art and to sell it those who are interested. I have collectors that collect almost every style of work I do. Others just focus on particular bodies of work, and that's only what they want because that's their cup of tea. I'm just the conduit and the creator of this work. It becomes its own entities out here in the world, and they go where they're supposed to go, and people own them who should own them.
Nice. Now, you've already achieved a dream of many artists in that you
Mm-hmm.
you you live the life of an artist and you have your own studio. But
Last 18 years.
but how many years?
18 years.
Wow.
18 plus years.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's flown by.
I wonder if you have any additional goals. For example, would you want your art to be in the Nasher, the Louvre, the
Oh, love that.
Art
I would
Institute of
love it.
Chicago?
I would
How,
love it.
so how does that happen?
I haven't figured that out.
How can you make that happen?
I haven't figured that out yet. Not fully. I think there's certain artists that make that their goal to target the certain kinds of markets when it comes to museum art that museums want, and that may be a certain size or political message or a certain particular in vogue style. I'm not really good at following trends. I kind of
Hmm.
try to make my own wake and do my own thing. I do have art in a lot of corporate collections, private
Hmm.
collections, and some
Hmm.
museum and collections, and I feel very blessed to have that. Um, I don't have an answer for all of that. I'm not exactly sure how some artists do it.
I
I
was
have
just
different opinions,
curious.
but
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't know exactly what the magic bullet is, so to speak. But
Mm.
I make my art and I just put it out there in the world. And some works that I thought were really great, others didn't see the significance of it. And then they'll come along later and say, "Oh, that was better than I thought." I mean, opinions just constantly move, as well as fashions and taste change.
Mhm.
And I'm not interested in trying to chase the wind.
Okay. I want to
I'm
ask.
trying I'm trying to
Oh,
pursue my journey.
I want to ask one more question, but after I ask the question,
Mm-hmm.
of course, I want you to feel free to totally market yourself, tell us where your studio is,
Okay.
etc. But what I want to
Uh-huh.
ask you, you do more than one type of art, as you pointed out.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you want? How do you want the world to see you after you move on to glory, so to speak? What kind of mark does Eric McRay make on the world?
I think indirectly I'm looking for immortality by being an artist. And I read a cartoon that said part of being an artist is trying to escape death. I think
Wow.
I'm more concerned with my, I guess, my legacy when it relates to my descendants, my children, grandchildren, so forth. In 100 years, can my grandson hold his head up and say, "Oh, that was my great grandfather," or whoever. That's more my concern. I'm not necessarily trying to impress everybody in the world or all that are out there. Its own place. I found great art in yard sales because somebody didn't know what they had, and somebody said, "Oh, that old thing," and they throw it out in the yard sale, and you buy it for $25.
Wow.
The art's going to just go wherever it's going to go. It's an object. It's a thing. But with my work, I'm more concerned about my children and descendants, because I think as an African American man, I don't necessarily have as many role models that I can look back on in my family that I can target. Oh, my grandfather, I knew he was a farmer and he owned a store. And my father was a entrepreneur who owned a cab company in Washington, D.C. called Coastline Cabs. But I would like to be able to have that kind of impression, a positive impression, and set a positive example to my family.
Nice. I like
That's my
that.
priority. That's my priority. And my mother told me this and made me really mad one time. She said, "You know, you're a role model." I said, "Oh God, don't say that." But she was talking to the greater society and as a African American man and as a father, so forth. And that's a reality that I address on a regular basis.
You know what? I really do want you to tell us more about your studio. You know why? Because I was giving a writing workshop at the Bragtown library, and there was this little guy. I mean, little. He was preteen. Well, he might have been a teenager, but very young. And he and his brother were amazing artists. They had no idea. They would draw dragons and what it was jaw-dropping, incredible.
I remember being that kid. Yes.
But you know what? I told his mom. Now they wanted to take part in the writing workshop, even though they didn't want to write. They wanted to. So I told them, yeah, well, illustrate your story. But here's the thing. I told their mom. Now back then, the Nasher was free, and I think they do have free days on certain days, certain afternoons. So I told their mom to take them to the Nasher because they had never been to an art museum. They were just average kids. They didn't know that there was a connection between what you do as a child on notebook paper and art in a gallery. That concept had not reached them yet. They were only like 13 and 15 or whatever. And their mom said that they almost died when they went in the Nasher. They had no idea.
That's awesome.
They had no idea that art was a thing. You know?
Well, I had that experience. I went to the Corcoran in Washington, D.C. when I was in middle school, and I saw these massive abstract paintings, one particular by African-American artist named Alma Thomas, tremendous abstract painter from the D.C. Color School movement, and it just blew my mind to see that. And my mother, as much as she was supportive, she had no understanding of art initially. She grew to be a tremendous help, as well as my wife, but that support and being exposure is key.
Definitely.
Seeing art, being around artists, and then that also is a catalyst for more discovery and curiosity.
So tell us about your studio. I really wish that if you're out there, if you know some young kids who are talented, like these other boys that I told you about, they might not. It might not occur to them that art is really a thing. A lot of times kids are brilliant in something, but they don't realize that they're gifted or that they could do something with that gift. So please tell us the location, when you're open, et cetera, and your website.
Well, I'm in the Art Space building in downtown Raleigh, 201 East Davie Street, on the corner of Davie and Blunt. The Art Space building is open to the public Tuesday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. My studio is open at varied times, but primarily I like to meet with groups by appointment. So you can give me a call at 919-614-2174 and email me or call me or text me, or you can email me at eric@ericmcray.com. McRay spelled MCRAY, ericmcray.com. You can go to my website or email me at eric@ericmcray.com.
Awesome. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
I want to throw a shout out at JLT Communications as well, helping to get the two of us together for this
Fantastic.
interview.
Good people, very good people. And thank you so much for having me on your program. You're a great host, excellent questions.
Oh, thank you.
And
Thank you.
and you came from some fantastic angles that really made me put my thinking cap on. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. And I can't wait to see your studio in person.
All right, you're more than welcome. Remember to call first.
I will. Yes, I will call you first.
Excellent. So I look forward to meeting you in person and crossing paths again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric McRay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, folks. Well, I hope you enjoyed that show. Now, if you'd like to be a guest on TV Skywriter, you don't have to be local. I'm in Durham, North Carolina. Eric McRay is in Raleigh, but I've interviewed people from England and Brazil and whatnot. So if you want to be a guest, all you have to do is contact me. I guess the quickest way is on Twitter at Durham Skywriter. And with that, I hope you have a beautiful day. Ciao for now, and thank you, Eric McRay.
Thank you.
Okay. See you later, folks. Have a beautiful day.